as you are coming in on the trail, basically what you're standing on is a berm that prevents the Possum Creek when it floods from going that way. And on the other side of the creek, there's also another berm. So that stretch of creek that you walk down is actually really confined in terms of what it's able to do. For example, if we have 2 hurricanes within a month or something like that come through town. And so we really saw this system, how dynamic it can be last fall, and it was really pretty eye-opening. We're pretty happy with the city of Gainesville to be able to offer people the opportunity to see some of these areas around the creek. Some of the natural areas around the creek, such as Loblolly Woods, where we are now, are really quite unique and quite valuable, and they're also provide a lot of recreational opportunities for people, just for hiking and other things. But because the Greenway Trail does go through some pretty sensitive and pretty wet areas, we did have to boardwalk certain sections of that just to make sure that there wasn't continued disturbance to areas around the creek, and we want to prevent our own natural areas from providing detrimental impacts such as siltation and sedimentation to the creek. So things like boardwalks can help to prevent that. And when it floods, you can really see the difference between what happens in an area that's been trod upon for months and months and has no vegetation versus an area that's actually naturally vegetated and has been protected. So one of the things that we can do here to try to help the condition of the creek downstream is to try to make sure that people are staying on trails and that some of the vegetation around the floodplain is actually remaining in good condition to keep that sand there and to keep it from going downstream. Several of the things that were illustrated through the walk, one was just to get people to understand the importance of the creek and to have some understanding of just the way the creek functions, providing habitat for wildlife and in terms of its contribution to our drinking water, but also to show people how some of the things that we do can affect the health of the creek. So for example, we had some demonstrations.
This is the Hogtown Creek Basin. Hogtown Creek flows through all these neighborhoods, this golf course, this little factory up here, and this farmland, and then it flows into the Florida Aquifer through the sink.
So basically a lot of things that happen in the city in terms of the patterns of development, the kinds of land use, the way that we do or do not try to treat and deal with our stormwater, all affect not just the ecosystems of the Hogtown Creek area, but they also affect the quality of the water that's going directly into the aquifer and ultimately into our drinking water.
And then the problem is that wetland's soaking it up, but it doesn't get soaked up by the development. See how this wetland's soaking up all the pollutants? It's all in there. Mayflies are very sensitive to pollution. Caddisflies also very sensitive to pollution. Mayflies have 3 long tails. It's hard to see in this picture, but they have 3 long, delicate tails.
So basically the main points of the walk were to introduce people to some of the natural areas in the area, to get people thinking a little bit about how the things that we choose to do in the city can impact the creek, and then also to tell some people what some of the agencies are doing in order to help to protect and improve the condition of the creek. The types of forests that exist around Hogtown Creek are actually fairly unusual in Florida, and this pine flatwoods dominated. So we have a lot of different species that might not be seen in other parts of the state. Some of the things we see in Hogtown Creek on occasion, river otters come up. There's also a wide variety of songbirds here. This is a fairly popular bird watching spot for people in the area. There are some unusual plants and animals that live here that are actually quite rare, so things like the Say's spike-tailed dragonfly is something that's found in the Hogtown Creek area that actually requires creeks like the Hogtown Creek, and it's only known from a few places in the world. Anytime vegetation is cleared around the creek, it affects the creek's quality as habitat for wild animals. So for example, it can affect the temperature of the creek, which there in turn affects the chemistry of the creek in terms of the amount of oxygen that's in the water and some other things. So that's an effect. Another effect is sedimentation. So when you replace, say, a forested area like we're standing in right now, in this forested area there's a lot of vegetation that can intercept rainfall as it falls. So the rainfall then is kind of slowly released to the forest floor and doesn't all reach the forest floor and flow into the creek at once. But if you replace a forest with a parking lot, obviously the water that hits that parking lot is moving a lot faster and heading into the creek much more quickly. So that causes a lot of erosion and can make the banks of the creek unstable. It can also smother some of the vegetation in the floodplain by burying it underneath sediment.
We have a storm event. If we have a 1-inch rain, even this thing just rises tremendously, and there's just this force that, as you can see, is eroding and continuously changing the stream channel.
Well, a couple of things people can do in order to contribute towards kind of protecting the creek: reduce the amount of pesticides and fertilizers that they use in their landscaping. In addition to that, people can certainly get involved in educating their neighbors about other sorts of landscaping choices, for example, using native landscape plants. People can also get involved in just sort of the decision-making process in the community